Welcome back to Sanjay Godawat, IIT and Medical Academy. I am Ramesh, Zoology faculty. In our previous class, we all discussed about the structure of heart with the fibroskeletal of heart. Okay. The next topic in the body fluid and circulation, cardiac cycle, the mechanism of heart. Okay. The heart beats, okay, how, okay, the blood pumping to the different direction, what is systole, diastole, giant diastole, like this, right. So, first definition, the cardiac cycle. Okay, in a heart there is a cyclical events, okay, one after the another continuously throughout the life, okay, the cyclical events what takes place in the heart, that is a cardiac cycle. Okay, so cardiac cycle includes mainly three events: auricle systole, ventricle systole, joint diastole, right. Auricle systole, nothing but both the chambers of atria contraction, that is the auricle systole, right. Next to ventricle systole, okay, both the chambers of ventricles contraction, that is the ventricle systole, okay. Then diastole, relax, the chambers come back to the normal state, nothing but relaxed states, okay, that is a cardiac cycle. And if you take the cardiac cycle definition, beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next is constitute known, okay, the cardiac cycle. This is the cardiac cycle, okay, with the three different events, right. So, if you take the beginning stage, okay, auricle systole is the beginning stage, right. Auricle systole, the beginning of auricle systole to the beginning of the next is constitute known cardiac cycle, okay, or one heartbeat. The duration of the cardiac cycle is about 0.8 seconds. Within a 0.8 seconds, what happened? It completes, okay, three activities are done, like auricle systole, ventricle systole and the joint diastole are completed within a 0.8 seconds. Right, with if you take the flow chart about the cardiac cycle, three, okay, events: auricle systole, ventricle systole and the joint diastole with different activities, right. And if you take the, okay, slide, the structure, right. Already we have discussed about the fibroskeletal in the hearts, right. This is heart, right atria, left atria, right ventricle, left ventricle, okay. The nodal tissue, right. The nodal tissue includes the specialized tissue in the hearts include the two nodes, sinoatrial nodes, atrioventricular nodes, the primary nodes, the secondary nodes, okay. So, this is the primary node here, this is the primary node and these are the fibers, the cardiac fibers innervated to auricle musculature, right. Now, the secondary nodes, this is secondary nodes, anterior tip of the ventricle bifurcate into two branches, right, and innervated into ventricle musculature. This is secondary node extension, okay, like bundle of branches, Purkinje fibers, okay, this secondary node extension, right. And now the heart, right, heart before the auricle systole, what happened exactly? This is human heart with the four chamber, right atria, right ventricle, left ventricle. This is the opening, right, and the valves, here the AV valve present, this is tricuspid, this is bicuspid, right, whereas pulmonary valve diagram, this is ventricle diagram, right ventricle, left ventricle. This is the pulmonary trunk, arteries, and here lungs, right? And this is systemic trunk, right? Systemic trunk. Okay. Here the valves, that is a valve semilunar. This is right semilunar, this is left semilunar. Okay. So, before the auricle systole in a heart, there are total 3 activities. The cardiac cycle includes 3 activities: auricle systole, the ventricle systole, and the joint diastole. Okay. So, first auricle systole, okay, 0.1 second. And before the auricle systole, what happened, right? The tri and bicuspid wall open in position, whereas the semilunar walls close, like this is closed condition, semilunar wall closed. Okay, so that is a first important notes. And due to the opening of these two wall, like a tri and bicuspid wall, what happened? The atria blood, okay, the atria blood enter into ventricle, right? The atria blood enter into ventricle. So, this is left atria, blood enter into the left side of the ventricle, right? And the right atria bloods enter into right side of the ventricle, because the wall like a AV wall open in position, right? So, due to this condition, what happened? The atria blood directly enter into the ventricles. Almost ventricles filled 70% bloods. This is called passive ventricular filling. Passive ventricular filling is equal to 70%. What is passive ventricular filling? Means without any energy, okay, the auricles blood enter into the ventricles. So, generally the right atria collects, okay, deoxygenated blood from different body parts by 3 caval veins, okay, upper body parts by the precaval veins, lower body parts by the postcaval veins, okay, and the heart wall, okay, by the coronary sinus. So, that is the 3 caval veins. It collects deoxygenate, whereas left atria collects oxygenated blood, okay, from the lungs by the pulmonary veins, total 4 pulmonary veins, okay, and that is a function of the different atria. Means in right atria deoxygenate, left atria oxygenator, enter into ventricles due to opening of these two wall. So, when the ventricles are, okay, complete passive ventricular filling, like without any energy, okay, 70% fill. When PVF, passive ventricular filling, is completed, what happened? In heart, the primary node generates action potential. Action potential without any help, okay, produce action potential, right? Hence, this primary node is called pacemaker. After production of these action potential, first of all, it spread to entire auricle musculature by these 5 results. What happened? Okay, when action potential spread to the auricle musculature, right? This is auricle musculature, right? Auricle musculature. Okay, when the muscles, auricle muscles are received action potential, okay, both the auricles muscles, okay, become excite and contract simultaneously. Okay, so that is a auricle systole. Results what happened due to the auricle systole by this action potential, what happened? Okay, the rest of the auricle blood enter into the ventricles. The remaining rest of the blood is equal 30% bloods. This is the 30% blood, okay, enter into the ventricle. This is called Okay, this is active ventricular filling. Active ventricular filling is equal 30%. Means before the auricle systole, okay, due to the opening of the tri and bicuspid wall, okay, the atrial blood enter into the ventricles. Results what happen, the passive ventricular filling is completed. So, when the ventricles complete the PVF, passive ventricular filling, what happen, the primary node, okay, generate action potential and spread first auricle musculature. Results, the auricle muscles excite and contraction simultaneously. Results, the atrial blood, okay, at a time enter into the ventricles. Right atrial blood enter right side of ventricle. Left atrial blood enter into the left side of the ventricle. So, that is our auricle systole. In the auricle systole, what happened? Okay, the remaining 30% blood enter into the ventricles. This is auricle systole. During auricle systole, the ventricles are relaxed in position. Okay, so each ventricles, okay, filled 120 ml of bloods. Okay, each ventricles carry 120 ml of blood. This is, okay, end, okay, diastole. End diastole volume, end diastole volume, EDV, end diastole volume is equal to 120 ml. Means during auricle systole, ventricles are relaxed in position and each ventricles fill almost 120 ml of the bloods. That is called end diastole, okay, end diastole, okay, relaxed stage of ventricle, each ventricle carry maximum 120 ml. This is auricle systole, right? And next, after the auricle systole, what happened? Now we go to the second event in the heart, that is ventricle systole. Within 0.1 second, the auricle systole complete. Means the action potential spread to the auricle, get excite, contraction, the blood pass within a 0.1 second. Next, we go to the ventricle systole. Means the lower two chambers systole, that is a contraction called ventricle systole. The duration 0.3 seconds. Okay, so during this event, what happened in the heart, right? Like first of all, the action potential, the secondary node, AV nodes spread the action potential to the entire ventricle musculature by bundle of branches and the Purkinje fibers spread to the entire ventricle musculature. When the action potential pass to the ventricle musculature, right? This is the ventricle musculature, cardiac muscles. When the heart or ventricle muscle receiving like action potential, what happened? The muscle excite and the contractions simultaneously. Results, what happened? The ventricle size get reduced and due to the increases of the ventricular blood pressure, the blood pass to the different direction. Okay, so after spreading the action potential, first muscle excite, contraction, right? So during the beginning of the ventricle systole, what happened? Okay, ventricular blood pressure increases, results like tri and bicuspid wall closed, right? Here, this is the tri and bicuspid. The tri and bicuspid walls closed like this, closed, right? And there is no chance to move back. Okay, so that's why at the same time automatically like semilunar walls, right? Semilunar wall opened due to the high ventricular blood pressure. The tri and bicuspid walls closed. Semilunar wall opens. Results, the right ventricle's blood enter into pulmonary trunk. Okay, then pulmonary artery. This is pulmonary artery. This is the pulmonary trunk, right? Two pulmonary arteries. Then lungs. So this is lungs. Okay, and next to left ventricle's oxygenator bloods. This is carbon dioxide blood. Move towards lungs for exchange of the gases. Left ventricle's oxygenator blood enter into aorta, ascending aorta. This is ascending aorta, descending aorta, arteries, okay, arterioles and the capillaries, the finally capillaries. Here exchange, okay, like nutrients, oxygen exchange in the tissues, right. So, at a time the ventricles, both ventricles blood, okay, pump into the different directions. Right ventricles blood move towards lungs by the pulmonary trunk and pulmonary arteries, and the left ventricle oxygenated blood, okay, pump to the, okay, systemic capillaries by the ascending aorta, descending aorta, arteries, arterioles, capillaries, right. This is called ventricle systole. Within a 0.3 seconds, the ventricle systole, the blood pump to the different direction. Okay. So, out of 120, right, out of 120 ml of blood, each ventricle pump 70 ml of bloods, 70 ml, here 70 ml. Okay. So, out of 120, 70 ml of blood moves from the ventricles. The remaining 50 ml, right, remaining 50 ml of blood always remain in the ventricles. 50 ml of blood always remain in the ventricle. This is called okay, systole volume. End systole volume is equal to 50 ml. Means in the relaxed stage, each ventricles carry or load 120. Out of 120, only 70 ml pump to the different direction. Right ventricle pump 70, left ventricle pump 70. The rest of 50 ml remain in the ventricles and maintain the ventricular volume, okay, and that is called end systole volume of blood is equal to 50 ml, that remain in the ventricle always maintain the ventricular pressure, okay. So, that is called ventricle systole. So, first auricle systole, right, first action potential pass to the auricles, musculature, contraction, the blood pass to the ventricles, that is a active ventricular filling. Before auricle systole, okay, like due to opening of these two wall, passive ventricular filling is takes place, 70%, okay, takes place. Then after completion of PVF, okay, the primary node generate action potential first spread to the auricles, then systole, remaining blood pass, that is a AVF 30% called active ventricular filling. So, when the ventricles fill, okay, like 120 ml of bloods, secondary node relay the action potential to the ventricle musculature, then systole. During the ventricle systole, right, the blood different, okay, move to the different directions, okay, like beginning of the ventricle systole, what happened, the trend bicuspid wall close, semilunar wall open, results the blood move to the different trunks, that is ventricle systole. Now, last event in the heart, that is a joint diastole. Joint diastole, right, nothing but all the muscles come back to the relaxed state, okay. So, due to the absence of the action potential, right, due to the absence of action potential, all the chambers, heart chambers come back to the original state, okay, that is a relaxed position. First auricles get relaxed, then followed by ventricles relax, because the first action potential disappear in the auricles, then followed by the disappearance in the ventricles, okay. The only one reason, absence of the action potential, okay, the chambers come back to the relaxed state, that is called joint diastole. The duration is equal 0.4 seconds, total, okay, 0.8 seconds, one cardiac cycle is finished, okay. So, in the joint diastole, disappearance of first action potential, first atrial relax, then followed by ventricle relax. At the same time, what happened, like a tri-end bicuspid wall open and the starts passive ventricular filling again, okay, and semilunar wall close. When semilunar wall close, what happened, there is no movement, back movement of bloods from the trunks to the ventricles, preventing backflow. That is called passive ventricular filling, again begins, okay, it belongs to the next cardiac cycle, right. So, when passive ventricular filling is done, again the primary node generate one more action potential, pass to the ventricles, become systole, auricle systole. The next cycle begins. right? Auricle systole, what happened? Remaining 30% blood enter into the ventricles. That is called auricle systole. When the auricle systole, ventricles are diastole in position, like maintain 120 ml of bloods. Okay, next ventricle systole. In the ventricle systole, what happened? First, action potential relate to the ventricle musculature, then contraction, right? Due to contraction, what happened? Okay, the ventricular blood pressure increases because size get reduced, the pressure increases. As a result, tri and bicuspid wall close, semilunar wall open, right? The blood pump to the different trunks. After pumping 70 ml of bloods, 70 ml of blood pumped to the different directions. Right ventricle 70%, 70 ml of blood move towards lungs, and the left ventricle 70 ml of blood move towards body capillaries. Okay. Then what happened after pumping? Relax, because absence of action potential, the chambers relax. First auricle relax, then followed by ventricle relax. Okay. And during the diastole, what happened? The tri and bicuspid wall again opened, semilunar wall closed. It leads to begin passive ventricular filling again, right? This is the cardiac cycle. Okay, the cyclical event, one after the another continuously takes place in the hearts. Systole, okay, and then ventricle systole, then diastole. Systole, systole, diastole, right? This is cardiac cycle with the different activities. Now come back to the our main slides, right? So three different stages of the cardiac cycle: auricle systole, ventricle systole, and the jointed diastole, right? With the different events and the duration. Before the auricle systole, right? Already we have discussed. Before the auricle systole, what happened? Like a tri and bicuspid wall open. Okay, so tri and bicuspid wall opened, semilunar wall closed conditions. Result in the a heart, what happened? Okay, like a passive ventricular filling is takes place, right? So the ventricles are slowly filled with the blood from the auricles. That is a passive ventricular filling, about 70, right? The PVF, passive ventricular filling, is equal to 70%. When the passive ventricular filling is complete, okay, the primary node of the heart generate action potential, spread to the auricle muscles. Result, the systole, auricle systole. During the auricle systole, what happened? AVF is takes place. Active ventricular filling 30%, okay, is done. This is auricle systole. Next to ventricle systole. In the ventricle systole, what happened? Okay, ventricles, both ventricles maximum maintain 120 ml of the bloods. During the auricle systole, ventricles are diastole in position. Each ventricles maintain 120, right? In the ventricle systole, first action potential spread to the ventricle musculature, okay, and the muscle excite contraction, right? During the contraction, the tri and bicuspid wall closed, semilunar wall open. Results, the ventricles blood move to the different direction. That is a ventricle systole, within 0.3 seconds the ventricle systole is completed. Like right ventricle's blood pumped to the lungs by the pulmonary trunk and the pulmonary arteries. The left ventricle's oxygenated blood pump into aorta, ascending, descending aorta, then different structures. Okay, so that is a ventricle systole. In the ventricle systole, each ventricle's pump, okay, only 70 ml of bloods. The rest of the blood remain in the ventricles. And this is ventricle systole. Next to diastole. The jointed diastole, what happened? Okay, absence of the action potential, the chambers, okay, come back. First auricles relax, then followed by the ventricles relax. Okay, so this is joint diastole. In the jointed diastole, what happened? Like a semilunar wall closed and opened, okay, AV wall. Results, again begins the passive ventricular filling, 70% starts. When the ventricles filled with 70%, okay, passive ventricular filling, the primary node again generate one more action potential, okay, for triggering one more cardiac event. That is auricle systole again begins. So this is cyclical event. The beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next is constitute called the cardiac cycle, right? And this is about the cardiac cycle with different structures and the mechanisms, right? The nodal tissue structure and the passive ventricular filling, okay, auricle systole, then the ventricle systole and the relax, okay, ventricle blood move to the different directions, okay. Next to heart sounds, okay, heart sounds. In a heart, during cardiac cycle, there are two different sounds are produced, okay. The primary sound called lub and the secondary sound called dub. Okay, so very important objective wise, when heart produces the primary sound and the secondary sound, objective wise important. Okay, in heart there are, okay, during cardiac cycles two different sounds are produces, like primary sound S1 sound, okay, the secondary sound S2 sound, the primary sound called lub, okay, the secondary sound called dub sound. Okay, if you take the sound, okay, like when heart produces primary and the secondary sounds, if you take again, come back to the previous diagram, right, like this is systole, the blood pump to the ventricles, right, this is systole, ventricle. So during the ventricle systole, the beginning of the ventricle systole, what happened, okay, the tri and bicuspid wall closed and semilunar wall open, right. So ventricle systole, due to increases of the ventricular blood pressure, okay, AV wall forcefully closed and heart produces the primary sound called lub, that is a S1 sound or primary sounds. Okay, once again, during the beginning of the ventricle systole, due to closing of the AV wall, tri and bicuspid wall, what happened, the heart produces the primary sound, that is called lub. Whereas if you take the secondary sound, okay, during the diastole events, okay, like a diastole event, what happened, okay, the semilunar wall closed, okay, like due to like closing of the semilunar wall, heart produces the secondary sound, that is called dub, okay. So lub is a primary sound due to closing of the ventricle, okay, closing of the AV wall, during the beginning of the ventricle systole. Whereas if you take the secondary sound, okay, during the diastole events, okay, diastole event, what happened, like semilunar wall closed, right, due to closing of semilunar wall, and heart produces the secondary sound, that is a S2 sound. This is, okay, the main reason for the production of the hearts, right. If you take the sounds S1, S2, right. So S1 sound caused by closing of AV wall, beginning of the ventricle systole. Okay, so ventricle systole beginning, what happened, the pressure increases, result AV wall forcefully close its aperture, result heart produces the primary sound. Whereas the secondary sound, closure of the semilunar wall, okay, closing of the semilunar wall during the diastole, ventricle diastole, the ventricle, okay, size increases, okay, like what happened, the volume increases, pressure decreases, result what happened, the semilunar wall close, come back, right, and produces a secondary sound. This is like a S1 and the S2, right. The one more important point of primary sound is a lesser sound, low pitch voice and longer bits, okay, so less sound, low pitch, longer, okay, prolong. Whereas S2 sound, okay, louder, high, okay, high pitch and the short, okay, very close, okay, that is the differences about the heart sound, okay. So this is in that objective wise very important thing is when heart produces the primary sound and the secondary sound, right. The beginning of the ventricle systole, and due to the closing of the AV wall, heart produces a primary sound. The secondary sound, like due to closing of the semilunar wall, right, during the diastole of the ventricle, right, heart produces secondary sound. This is heart sound, like primary and secondary. Okay, if you listen the heart sound, okay, listen carefully. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . once again, right, this is our heart sounds, lup, dub, lup, dub, right. In a single cardiac cycle, heart produces two different sounds like S1 sound, S2 sounds, right. So, this is heart sounds. Next we go to the stroke volume and the cardiac outputs. This is the final concept in the cardiac cycle, right. If you take the stroke volume first, the simple definition, the volume of blood is pumped out by each ventricle in a cardiac cycle. During cardiac cycle or during a single heartbeat, the how much amount of blood is pumped out by each ventricle, that is called the stroke volume, right. The stroke volume definition, the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle during single heartbeats or during cardiac cycle, that is equal stroke volume. The stroke volume is equals 70 ml. This is object wise important. The normal stroke volume 70 ml. Now we go to the outputs. The cardiac output is nothing but like the amount of blood is pumped out by each ventricle during a minute of time, that is called cardiac outputs. How to calculate the cardiac outputs? The cardiac output is equal the stroke volume into number of heartbeats per minute, that gives rise cardiac outputs. And first definition formula, the volume of blood pumped out by each ventricle during a minute of time called cardiac outputs. The cardiac output is equals the stroke volume into number of heartbeats per minute. Number of heartbeats per minute, if you take 72 times, that is average heartbeat 72 times. The finally cardiac output is equal 50-40 ml or 5 liters per minute. Means in a minute of time, in a single minute, heart, each ventricle of heart pump 5 liters of blood to the different direction, that is equal cardiac outputs, right. Sometimes in objective point of view, what happened, they can change stroke volume either like a heartbeats per minutes. So, if you take in X person, objective point of view, if you take the question in X person, the stroke value is equal 70 ml, whereas like a number of heartbeats is equal to 70, 70, right. And what is the cardiac outputs? The cardiac output, this is object wise question. Sometimes they can change heartbeats per minute, sometimes change stroke volume also. The simple formula, the cardiac output for the calculation, the cardiac outputs, stroke volume into number of heartbeats. So, that is equal cardiac outputs. In a normal man, the cardiac outputs, 72 heartbeats per minute, 70 ml, and the final the cardiac output is equal 5 liters of blood or 50-40 ml, right. And one more important point about the stroke volume cardiac outputs. We have the ability alter stroke volume, heartbeats and the cardiac outputs also. So, due to like a regular exercising yoga, practicing yoga, they can change our stroke volume, right, the cardiac outputs and the number of heartbeats also, right. That is a object wise important, and this is finally the cardiac cycle is closed, right. If you take the beginning slide, like the cardiac cycle, flow charts, definition, 3 phases, the next two, right, heart sound before this, and the mechanism of the cardiac cycle, on a clear separate slides, with the different diagrams, right. And next to heart sounds, with different sounds like S1 and the S2. So, finally, cardiac cycle is closed. Once again, listen the sounds. Thank you.